Good morning, students. My name is Tangi Ausiku, and I am your tutor for assessment and evaluation. I would like to welcome you all to the exam-based contact classes for 2017. Students, before we start to do anything, I would like us to look at the subject overview. Assessment and evaluation plays a vital and important role in education. It is most likely that you will learn about assessment as well as assessment techniques throughout your teaching career. And you might possibly quite not know that there is to know about the aspect of teaching. But I would like to encourage you to enjoy this course as it will guide you on how to set up your different assessment activities. Students, I hope that you and I will both enjoy this course. I would also like to urge you as students to commit to your studies. Allocate enough time for your studies in order for you to understand the concept and the information that is available to you in the study guide. If you may have any problems, please do not hesitate to email me or to contact me on my telephone number. Before we look at the content, I would like us to look at the verbs of assess, or the verbs usually used when questions are set. I have come to realize that at times as students you struggle with these verbs, and if you do not understand these verbs outlined by Bloom's taxonomy, you will not be able to understand what the question is expecting of you, or you would not be able to know how to answer the question. We would look at a few verbs that are common within your assignment or within the exams. The first verb that we would look at is when you are asked to define. It is expected of you to give a brief and precise meaning of something. The word define is derived from a definition, which is a brief and precise meaning of something. When you are asked to compare, you are asked to indicate the differences and the similarities of something. I've come to realize that at times when you are asked to compare, you just write it in one big paragraph. But to make your work look more clearer to the marker or to the person reading your work, it is always best to outline your differences and your similarities in a tabular form. This makes your work look neat and more understanding to the person marking. It also shows that you understand what is asked of you. When you are asked to describe, it is important to give details, features, to provide a detailed feature of how a specific issue looks like, or to give detailed information on how the process or something is being done. When you are describing that Sarah is a girl, you have to give all the features of Sarah. Sarah is she is a girl, she is tall, she is slender in body, or she is big in body. You need to give exact description on how Sarah looks like. So when you are asked to describe, you need to give detailed information about something. When you are asked to determine means you use information given in order for you to come out with an answer. This helps you to give a clear instruction, or this helps you to apply the knowledge that you have received in order to derive to an answer. The next one that we will look at is to discuss. When you are discussing, you give a brief discussion which is clear, and you also argue on the point that is being given, be it the argument where you outline the positives or the negatives, or you discuss the advantages and disadvantages, but you need to give a clear description of something and not forgetting to give the pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages of something or the issue that you may have been asked about. Lastly, if you are asked to explain, there you need to describe something in order to indicate the relationship between things, making clear on why and how certain features are. So if you are asked to explain why you need to, or why it is important to give matching questions, for example, you need to make sure that you explain what matching questions are, why they are there. You need to explain how they are being done. You need to explain the advantages of it and the disadvantages. Students, this is very important that you also look at the number of marks that have been allocated, because if you do not look at the number of marks that have been allocated, you would not know how much you need to explain, to discuss, to determine. I hope these common verbs that usually pop up among many are clear to you as you are preparing for your examination. Content-wise, we will look at Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3, Unit 4, Unit 5, as well as Unit 6 and Unit 7. We will also look at, in Unit 1, the basic assessment concepts and perspectives. We would look at Unit 2, the general and primary assessment directives of Namibia. Unit 3 and 4, we would look at the aims, constructions, and application of assessment tools. Unit 5, we would look at the basic assessment concepts and perspectives. Unit 6, we would look at the marking and grading techniques. And in Unit 7, we would look at feedback on the reporting assessment results. In Unit 1, we will look at the 3 learning domains. Then we will look at the multiple intelligences. Then we will also look at the educational objectives and learning outcomes. Formative and summative assessment, we would look at peer and self-assessment, the purpose of assessment, principles of good assessment, continuous assessment, as well as coursework. Without further ado, let's look at the 3 domains outlined by Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy outlines 3 domains, which is the cognitive domain, the affective domain, as well as the psychomotor domain. The affective domain deals with the feelings and emotions of learners. And then the cognitive domain deals with the intellectual capability as well as the intellectual skills that the learner might have. And then the psychomotor domain deals with the movement of a learner. These domains help us to identify the different skills that our learners in a classroom setting might have. The second one we would look at is the multiple intelligences that have been outlined by Garner. We have got 7 multiple intelligences, which are the linguistic intelligence that deals with the words and language. Then we have got the logical mathematical intelligence that deals with logical thinking and numbers. Then we have got the musical ability that deals with the musical intelligence that deals with the musical ability of learners. Maybe you have a child in the class that knows how to express him or her best at music, or this child is good at music. And then we have an intelligence of bodily kinestic, which is the body movement control. Maybe the child is best at physical education. Then we have got the spatial visual. This is when if a child is able to create a visual mind by just setting out something there, if the child is able to create a mind or a picture in his or her mind. And then we have got the interpersonal, which is the perceptions of other people. And the intrapersonal is the child aware of him or herself and what is around him or her. Furthermore, we will also look at the learning outcomes and learning objectives. If you take your syllabus, you will see that it has been divided into sections. You have got the educational outcomes, and then you have got the learning outcomes. Now, what is an educational outcome? Now, an educational outcome are much broader than learning outcomes. They are, in effect, policy statements that give a direction to the education system and provide a foundation on which to build the education system of Namibia. The purpose of these are to prepare teaching, to prepare learning programs, to facilitate the course planning, to facilitate learning, to facilitate evaluation, to help in curriculum design, and also to help select approach and instruction. Learning outcomes then, on the other hand, are statements of which a learner is expected to know and understand and be able to demonstrate at the end of a learning, at the end of a theme. So at the end of the theme, it is expected of, for example, John to know how to use a rain gauge, or he should know how to use a windmill or the purpose of a windmill, or at the end of the lesson John should know that 1 + 1 = 2, basic mathematics, basic numerical skills. He should be able to count. So what a child needs to know after learning has taken place of a specific theme or topic. The purpose of learning outcomes are: it gives learners a clear understanding of what is expected of them. It gives the teacher a clear indication of the content and which learning activities as well as the assessment activities he or she should use in the class. It is also important because it influences the learning domain and level of the learning that is required. Students, I hope you understand the difference between educational objectives as well as learning outcomes. Now, next we will look at the formative and summative assessment. Formative assessment is assessment made during the course of the year in order to improve learning and teaching that has been taking place during the course of the year. Now, formative assessment is, for example, if you teach on the solar system, at the end of the lesson or at the end of the theme, then you give a formative assessment. You give an assessment to the learner in order to see how far he or she understands the solar system. Or it does not necessarily also need to be a test. It can also be a class activity that can be marked with peer marking. Then you have got summative assessment. Summative assessment is more formal. This is assessment that is done at the end of the lesson, at the end of the academic year, based on the accumulation of progress and achievements that have been done during the course of the year. So this basically means it is your examination at the end of the year that will determine promotion. Because the child has been, or the learner has been, accumulating different types of information and lessons, or has gone through different stages and accumulated different information during the course of the year. Now you want a summary to see whether this learner or student understands what has been done during the course of the year in order to determine promotion. Another form of assessment that can be used in a classroom setting is self-assessment and peer assessment. Self-assessment is about revision and improvement. It enables learners to independently, on their own, assess their own and other learners' progress with confidence rather than always relying on the teacher's judgment. At times, you would like to give the learner a little bit of independence. So you give him an activity to do, and you do give the corrections back into the class with the learners, whereby the learners do the corrections themselves, or they can swap books and they can mark. But in this case, self-assessment is the learner does self-introspection. He or she monitors his own work by marking, and the teacher gives answers. Through this, the learner gets to see whether he understands his work or does not understand his work, rather than waiting for the teacher to mark. It also helps to show a learner whether he's performing good or whether he's weak at a specific something or he's best at a specific something. Let's quickly look at the advantages of self-assessment. Self-assessment allows or helps learners to be able to identify their own learning needs. They get to know their strengths and weaknesses. They get to see how they're basically doing in their schoolwork. It also allows them to think critically as to, why am I performing poor here? What can I do? Or I need to do this in order to better that. They also get to know whether their work is good, and they get to improve their own learning. That is self-assessment. The disadvantages of self-assessment: students may lack the ability to evaluate one another or oneself. They may not take it seriously because they may allow friendship or other factors to influence them, because John is Sarah's friend. John does not want to hurt the feelings of Sarah by telling Sarah that you were poor in this area. It also causes discrimination, and without teachers' intervention, the learners may misinform one another. We will look at peer assessment. Peer assessment is nearly the same as self-assessment, except the learners are explicitly involved in helping each other to identify the standards and the criteria of making judgments of each other's work in relation to those criteria. What basically happens with peer assessment is you give an activity in class, then you allow them to do it. Then they swap books, then they start marking each other's books with the teacher's facilitation. You give the answers and the students, they mark. This allows them to get to see the mistakes that others are doing, and it also allows others to see the mistakes that they themselves are doing. It is also important to remember that peer assessment should be done on a regular, because it also boosts the students in order to work harder and compete against one another. So you instill a culture of peer assessment, because the learners do not want to let the others mark their work, because they do not want the others to mark work that is wrong. So it allows them to work harder and improve on mistakes that they have made. The advantages of peer assessment are: it brings learners in contact with the learning and helps them to view learning as non-threatening. Cooperation between learners encourages active learning. Learners receive prompt feedback, often directly after the completion of an assessment. Disadvantages of peer assessment: it takes time to explain to learners how assessment works and what is expected of them. It takes time for the learners to become skilled in the assessment of peers. There is a risk of giving inflated marks because of friendships and peer pressure, and learners have a tendency to give everybody the same mark. Those are the different types of assessments that one can use in class. Now let's look at why, the purpose for assessment and evaluation. The purpose of assessment and evaluation are to inform teaching, to promote and encourage learning, to promote optimal individual growth, and also to motivate the students to work hard. The principles of assessment: assessment should always be valid. It should also always be relevant and appropriate, and should always be clear for the learners to understand. It should be fair. Assessment should be accurate. Assessment should therefore also provide useful information. Irrelevant information will not be useful to the learners. Assessment should be integrated into the teaching learning cycle. Assessment should draw a wide range of evidence. Assessment should be manageable, transferable, as well as educative. That brings us to the end of Unit 1. Unit 2, the General and Primary Assessment Directives of Namibia. We have a body that governs our assessment in Namibia. Now, the functions of these directives are, this directive is to provide national assessment and certification service for a school system. It assists in enhancing the quality of education, and this directive or this body also monitors the education standards of Namibia. Unit 3. The aims and constructions and application of assessment tools. Assessment tools are the different assessment activities per se that you may use in the classroom. We have got different types, but I would like to focus on matching questions. Matching questions present a learner with two lists, a set of statements and a set of responses or keywords. The learner is often required to indicate which response from the second list corresponds with or matches with each statement from the first list. The aim of this is it helps the learner to think, and it also allows the learner not to have too many long questions to answer. How to construct matching questions? You provide more possible options than questions. Use longer phrases as questions and shorter phrases as opinions. Keep questions and opinions short and standardized. Avoid verbal cues and specific determiners such as, for example, the, and a. Number each question and use alphabetical letters as options. Specify in the directions the basis of matching and whether or not responses can be used more than once. The advantages of matching questions. They are simple to construct, short reading and responses time, allowing more content to be included in a given set of matching questions. Because matching items permit one to cover a lot of content in one exercise, they are an effective way to measure. A well-suited to measure association between facts, reduces the effects of guessing because the student ought to have studied in order to answer, and they are useful for assessing topics involving large amounts of factual information and an economical manner. The disadvantages of matching questions. They are difficult to measure learning objectives requiring more than one simple recall of information. Difficult to construct due to problem of selecting a common set of words and opinions, keywords and opinions. It can be time consuming in order for one to be able to construct good questions. Unit 5, Basic Assessment Concepts and Perspective. In this unit, we will look at the validity and reliability of assessment. The validity refers to the accuracy of assessment, whether or not it measures what it's supposed to measure. If a test is reliable, it may not provide a valid measure. So assessment should always be valid. Reliability refers to the extent to which assessment is consistent. It should not make any difference whether a learner takes an assessment in the morning or in the afternoon or in the next day. The assessment should always be reliable. Unit 6. Unit 6, we would look at the marking and grading techniques. Various aspects of marking and the use of different assessment tools. We would look at holistic marking. Holistic marking is grading or marking approach that focuses on representing the learner in his or her own entirety. Holistic marking will begin with the decision that the teacher perform on the first day of school and and at the end with the decision that the teacher and administrators make on the learner's grading, end of year grading or promotion. Emphasizing on the importance of the whole and its interdependent parts. Holistic marking refers to grading an essay as a whole. Feedback on reporting assessment results. The role of feedback to learners and assessment. It is important to give feedback to learners after every assessment. This is important because it allows learners to grow, it allows learners to improve, and it gives us learners an indication as to where they are going wrong and where they are doing good. It also gives a teacher a clear indication whether the teaching techniques that he or she is using in the classroom are effective, or one needs to change the different teaching methods and techniques in the classroom. Feedback also gives the teacher an indication whether the topic needs to be retaught or whether the green light has been given in order for the teacher to continue to the new work. This also gives teacher an indication that the teaching method that he or she is effective and should continue with this teaching method because children or learners are grasping the information well. The role of feedback after assessment. When you are giving feedback, the feedback should be based on the learning objectives and they should be clear. They should encourage and take account of the pupil's self-evaluation. Highlight where success has occurred and where improvement needs to take place. At times when you are grading a learner's work, perhaps you should just make a remark, well done John, or excellent John, or you need to improve Sarah, or Sarah you need to work harder, or any nice comment that needs to that will motivate the learner to work hard. At times, if you may or you can, do also paste funny faces, stars. These motivate learners to work hard because it shows, if a learner sees a star on his test paper, it shows that this learner has done an excellent job and it motivates the learner to work hard. Give feedback promptly and regularly to learners in a form that is accessible to them. Do not let the learners take a test and take 3 weeks before returning the test back to the learners. They become agitated and they become annoyed. So try your level best as a teacher to mark the work very fast as you can, correctly, so that you can give feedback to the learners so that it can motivate them. Do not give feedback to the learners without going through the feedback with the learners, expecting the learners to go through the feedback themselves. Let the learners go through the feedback with you so that they can identify their strengths and weaknesses. Give strategies for improvement. If you are grading an essay, for example, and the child has written one long paragraph, allow yourself to write in paragraphs or write him a small note. John, please use paragraphs, or John, please separate the big paragraph into 3 paragraphs, because if you do not make small notes to this learner, he will do the same mistake because you have not given him any strategies to improve. Have time allocated in which comments can be read. Have one-on-one sessions where you call in each learner and you ask him or her to read the comments out to you. Once they have read the comments out to you, or you as a teacher can read the comments to the learner if he or she cannot read. And then you explain and discuss one-on-one with the learner what the comment means, if the child needs to improve or the child just needs to work harder or the child needs to keep up. It is very important that you explain these feedbacks to these learners because it allows them to work harder and improve. Self-reflection instruments can be very beneficial to a learner. If a teacher uses self-reflection instruments, it should be done in such a way that it's useful to the learner. Teachers should give learners insight onto the learning process. It helps learners to integrate what they have learned. It provides learners with an understanding of the skills and strategies that they need to learn most effectively. It allows recognition of gaps as well as gaps that may exist in understanding. These gaps may be recognized and become significant to learners. They are motivated to locate, apply, and connect previous learning as well as construct new learning because these gaps have been identified. It enables learners to monitor, assess, and improve their own thinking and learning performances. Students, it is very important that you focus on your schoolwork. Please do bear in mind that this contact-based classes is not a scope for the examination. You should incorporate these slides as well as your study guide when you are preparing for your examination. I stress again that this is not the scope, but do not exclude what is in the study guide as well. Please do read through the slides and also consult your study guide. I wish you all the best for the exams. Last but not least, I would like to leave you with this. The sum of all efforts repeated day in and day out. Students, do not be afraid to fail, but be afraid not to try. Always remember that every accomplishment starts with the decision to try. Good luck and thank you very much.